A flickering candle in a quiet room. The sound of wind slips through a stone hallway. A voice rises, low and steady, like an echo from beyond. Why would he choose someone who would betray him? Why did Judas kiss him, knowing that kiss would lead to his death? And if you were Judas, would you have done it differently? A series of questions cracks like thunder across the wall of faith. Entering a night that shook the world. The setting, a quiet upper room before Passover. A long wooden table, 13 men seated, their souls uneasy. Not a moment for storytelling, but one for stepping into. As if you, the viewer, are sitting among them, breathing the same thick air. Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done. And blood-like sweat fell from his brow, soaking into a soil still sleeping beneath the weight of history. This is the moment. He chose to die rather than flee. He chose to forgive rather than retaliate. The final miracle before the storm. When the soldiers came to arrest him, he did not resist. Instead, he healed one of them, Malchus, whose ear had just been cut off. While others trembled, he reached out and touched the enemy. Because to Jesus, there were no enemies, only those who hadn't realized they were loved. Peter, the second betrayal. Peter denied him 3 times. Then, Jesus turned and looked at him. It wasn't a look of judgment. It was the same loving gaze from the lakeshore. The day they first met. He knew every weakness inside us, yet never turned his back. Compassion while torn apart. He was mocked, whipped, forced to carry his cross. And yet, he stopped. He stopped to comfort the women crying along the road. When insulted, he answered nothing. When beaten, he did not strike back. But when he saw someone in pain, he still paused to love. Forgiving the murderers on the cross. From that place of unbearable suffering, he said the greatest words in human history. Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. That one sentence shattered everything we thought we knew about justice, revenge, and power. This wasn't a wrathful God seeking retribution. This was a God who loved until it hurt. A worldwide pattern, not a one-time event. And so, we ask, was that not an apocalypse? Not a fire, not a flood, but an apocalypse of love, breaking open the hard, bitter shell of the human heart. Because the end of the world isn't always a cataclysm. Sometimes, it begins with indifference. People remember Judas Iscariot with one word, traitor. His name has become a curse across languages, Judas, the betrayer, the man who kissed and killed. But what if we took a step back? What if we looked beyond that final act and into the storm that raged inside him? The shattering of a dream under sacred light. The upper room was cloaked in silence. The oil lamp flickered. The scent of bread and wine mingled with something unspoken. 13 men sat around the table. All eyes rested on Jesus. Except one. Judas stared down at the cup in his hands. His grip tight, his heart tighter. He had watched Jesus for years, heal the blind, raise the dead, speak with a voice unlike any other. But tonight, something was unraveling. Something he could no longer understand. Then came the words, "Truly I tell you, one of you will betray me." The room froze. Each man, in disbelief, asked, "Is it I, Lord?" Even Judas asked, though he couldn't lift his eyes. And Jesus, quietly, handed him the dipped bread, a sign. Judas took it, swallowed, as if swallowing the weight of fate. The bargain with darkness. He stood, quietly, left the room, and Scripture simply says, and it was night. The darkness swallowed him, not just the world around him, but inside him, stone roads, silent shadows, a soul caught between belief and bitterness. Judas didn't betray Jesus for silver. He already had doubts long before the 30 coins. What broke him was that Jesus didn't fight, didn't rise up, didn't spark the rebellion, didn't become the Messiah Judas expected. He had hoped to force Jesus' hand to ignite a divine uprising. But it didn't work. Jesus surrendered. And in that moment, Judas's scheme collapsed under the weight of God's will. He didn't believe he could be forgiven. When he realized what he had done, Judas ran back to the priests. "I have sinned," he said. "I have betrayed innocent blood." But they turned away, cold as stone. "What is that to us? That's your responsibility." They had used him, and now discarded him. Judas threw the silver down, and in desperation, took his own life. But let's pause, because here's the tragedy. Judas wasn't rejected by Jesus. He was rejected by himself. Jesus knew and still chose him. In the upper room, Jesus washed every disciple's feet, even Judas's. Think about that. He knew what Judas would do. And still, he knelt before him, held his feet, touched the dirt of his journey. You only wash the feet of someone you love. Later, in the garden, when Judas arrived with soldiers, Jesus didn't draw a sword. He didn't condemn. He said, "Friend, do what you came to do." Friend, not traitor, not enemy. Friend. That was the last word Jesus spoke to him. Why didn't Judas return? Peter denied Jesus 3 times, but we remember him as a saint. Why? Because he wept. Because he came back. Judas, too, could have returned, but he didn't believe he was worthy of mercy. His true failure wasn't betrayal. It was believing that grace no longer applied to him. The mirror in every soul. Have you ever run from what you once believed in? Have you ever disappointed someone you loved? Have you ever sat alone, convinced that your mistake was too much, that the door was closed? Then you know Judas. But the gospel isn't a story of flawless men. It's a story of broken ones, being called back by love. And the tragedy is, Judas didn't wait long enough to hear his name called again. The shadow that speaks to us today. When the world feels like it's betraying itself, truth for convenience, love for power, we are all sitting at that same table. Every one of us holds the bread. Every one of us has the choice. To stay, to go, to return, even in your darkest night, even when you walk out of the room with the weight of 30 coins. You are still being called friend. The Mount of Olives stood still beneath the moonlight. From its slopes, one could see the sleeping city of Jerusalem, walls ancient and blind to what was unfolding in the garden below. Jesus knelt, alone. The air was cold, the ground hard, and yet, he pressed his face to the dirt, not out of weakness, but out of surrender. Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done. Sweat turned to blood, not metaphor, but flesh crying out under the weight of what he bore. The sins of the world, the silence of heaven, the final path, walked by choice. The God WHO walked into his own arrest. The soldiers came with torches and swords. They expected a man in hiding, maybe a rebel leader ready to resist. But instead, they found someone already waiting for them. Jesus stepped forward and asked, "Whom do you seek?" "Jesus of Nazareth, I am he." And when he said it, they fell backward. Even then, his words held a power that shook men to their knees. But he didn't follow it with fire. He didn't call down angels. He simply surrendered, because he didn't come to escape death. He came to walk straight into it and undo it from the inside. The last miracle for an enemy. When Peter, still clinging to old ideas of victory, drew his sword and struck a soldier, cutting off his ear, chaos erupted. But Jesus, he rebuked Peter. "Put your sword away, for all who draw the sword will die by the sword." And then, he picked up the severed ear of the man sent to arrest him, and healed him. Malchus, a name history nearly forgot, but heaven never did. Jesus' final miracle on earth was for someone who came to harm him. He didn't just tell us to love enemies, he loved them in their moment of violence. On trial, and yet silent, dragged before the high priest, then to Pilate, then Herod, then back to Pilate again, Jesus endured 6 trials in one night. He was mocked, beaten, spat on, a crown of thorns pressed into his head, a purple robe draped in mockery of kingship. And through it all, he said almost nothing. He didn't defend himself, not because he had no defense, but because he was defending something else entirely. He wasn't protecting his own life. He was protecting ours. The cross, a procession of love. He was forced to carry the cross, a beam of wood too heavy for most men, let alone someone already bleeding and battered. He fell, once, twice, 3 times, yet every time, he rose. And when he passed a group of women weeping, he stopped, mid-suffering, and spoke to them. "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me. Weep for yourselves and for your children." Because he knew, this wasn't just his pain. It was the world's. The hill called Skull, and the unthinkable words. Golgotha, 3 crosses rose above the city. In the center, the man who healed, forgave, wept, and washed feet. The crowd jeered. Soldiers gambled for his robe. Religious leaders sneered. And his followers? They scattered. But from that cross came words no one had ever heard before, and maybe never expected to hear again. Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. That was the moment the apocalypse began. Not in flames, not in wrath, but in mercy so radical. It cracked the very foundation of human justice. The earth trembled, because the heavens wept. At the 9th hour, he breathed his last. It is finished, and the sky went dark. The temple veil tore in two. The ground shook. Graves broke open, because something eternal had died, and the universe knew it. But not all ends are defeat. Some are doorways, and this was one. Are we living in the buildup of a new end? Look at our world. Truth is bartered for convenience. Kindness is viewed as weakness. Love has been rebranded as a commodity. And faith, replaced by cynicism. It's easy to believe the end is near. But maybe the end is already happening. In the quiet collapse of what we once held sacred, the cross isn't just a symbol of death, it's a blueprint of salvation. When Jesus died, he didn't lose. He descended into our deepest darkness and lit a fire that can never be put out. And the real question isn't, did he rise? It's, will we? Before the sun rose, the earth still mourned. The stone tomb stood silent, guards stationed at its mouth. The world thought it had silenced a man, and with him, a revolution. But heaven was not done. Not yet. A tear on Mary's cheek. Mary Magdalene walked slowly to the tomb. Her hands trembled, her heart heavier than the spices she carried to anoint the dead. She had loved him, not in a romantic way, but in the way only the broken can love someone who made them whole. And now, he was gone. She reached the tomb, but the stone was rolled away. The body was missing, the linens folded, a stillness so loud, it made her fall to her knees. And then, he called her name. A man stood behind her. She didn't recognize him, thought he was the gardener. But then, he said one word, Mary. Her breath caught. Only one voice ever said her name like that. Rabboni, she cried, reaching out. But Jesus gently pulled back. Do not hold on to me. Go and tell the others. Because resurrection is not something to be clutched. It is something to be shared. Why Mary? Why not Peter? Why not John? Because God chose the one society discarded. A woman, once labeled unclean, now the first to see the risen Christ. That's the gospel. That's the kingdom flipped upside down. The empty tomb is not just history, it's a daily invitation. If you're searching for hope in dead things, if you're looking for peace in empty wells, if you're waiting for signs but ignoring whispers, then hear this. He is not here. He is risen, and the same stone that sealed his grave can be rolled away from yours. The angel's question still stands. Why do you seek the living among the dead? Are you still dwelling in what hurt you? Are you chasing meaning through things that once gave it, but are now lifeless? Are you trying to revive a dream that's already been resurrected in a different form? Peter, the denier, redeemed by love. On the shore of Galilee, Jesus waited. He had breakfast ready, bread and fish on the coals. Peter approached, slow, ashamed. 3 times, Jesus asked, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Each time, Peter said yes. Each time, Jesus said, then feed my sheep. No lecture, no rebuke, just a call. Come back, start again, this time in love. Resurrection is not magic, it's a choice. You rise every time you forgive. You rise when you choose joy in mourning. You rise when you stop defining yourself by who you were and live into who you're becoming. You don't have to wait for the end of the world to be reborn. And if the apocalypse is coming again, it won't begin with fire, or angels, or the sound of trumpets. It will begin the same way it did the first time, when we forget we are loved, when we crucify what we don't understand, when we trade mercy for power. You are the sign, you are the story, you are the resurrection. You don't need to watch for it. You need to live it. You are the evidence that darkness doesn't win. You are the miracle someone's waiting to witness. You are the echo of the tomb, now empty. And the final whisper, if the end is returning, will you hide, or will you be the candle, flickering defiantly, in the night?